Thanksgiving week might not be looking good for the Walt Disney Company, with Moana 2 perhaps underperforming where the original movie was. The mainstream media is largely hiding that fact, but today we're going to expose it so that you know it. What are we talking about? Well, the freakout begins at Disney Animation as they worry they may have really screwed this one up. Hello folks, happy day and welcome back to the Pro Channel. We were talking about doing a Moana video, and that's why you have clicked this video, is because, well, that's what we're doing. And as I was deciding who would be the perfect person to talk about Dear Sweet Moana, the biggest girls princess franchise on the planet, and yes, we'll explain why it's bigger than Frozen later on, Culture Casino came to my mind. I mean, Culture, you are a Moana fanatic. You were the only person to fill this role. Welcome back, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure that's probably true, but I did love the original film, and I thought it was pure at heart. So, yeah, let's talk some Moana.
That's right. And folks, the real reason Culture is here is because he is a whiz when it comes to everything to do with movies, everything to do with finances, and so he was the perfect guy to be here. And then we'll talk, I'm sure, more about this on the Valiant Renegade show later on Sunday, if you're watching this video at the time of release. Here's the article we have, Culture. It is out of Broadway World, and it is by Josh Sharp. Moana 2 predicted to lead November box office, surpassing Wicked. Now, they are hiding the lead story here, I think, and we'll explain why. Things are not looking good for Moana 2, and it could be seen as a very surprising development given what happened with Inside Out 2. We'll explain in a moment. With Wicked seeing huge pre-sale ticket numbers, the upcoming film is likely to do well at the box office, but seemingly not quite as well as Moana 2. According to a new report in Deadline, the first part of Wicked is looking to gross between $67 million and $74 million during its opening weekend next month. This falls below Moana 2, Disney's animated sequel that is tracking to do $75 to $82 million during Friday to Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend. If Moana 2 reaches these numbers, it would be the biggest opening for Disney since Frozen 2, which brought in $125 million for the company in 2019. Both films will also compete with Gladiator 2, currently in third place with a $42 to $47 million opening. So you might look at this, Culture, and think, well, everything's just peachy keen. All of this is good. All of this is great. And we go to the Deadline article, and it talks about this, but I have bad news, Culture. I don't think this is good news at all, and we'll explain why. Culture, here's what I'm looking at. Back in 2016, when the original Moana came out, the average cost of a movie ticket was $8.65. Now, we know that very well. That's established. Anyone can go look that up. In 2024, it's a little bit more tricky because we've not yet finished the year, and we have competing theories about what the average movie ticket price is because ticket prices in 2024 are so varied depending on the movie, depending on the week, the weekend, etc. However, we've done our best to get the math exactly right and to be as favorable as we can to Disney. Our two competing numbers that we have, $11.75 per ticket and $13.98 per ticket. That's from two different aggregators of this information. And so we've come straight to the middle. $12.87 is what we currently believe is likely the average movie ticket price. We could have, for the sake of really punching the message of this video, we could have went with the $13.98. We chose not to. Now, what that means, Culture, is if we look down here at Moana 2, it's projected to get $75 to $82 million for a 3-day weekend, which is not good, people. I'm telling you why it's not good in just a moment. It's predicted to do $100 million plus over the 5-day, okay? Now, the first Moana came out, Culture, and it pulled in $82 million over its 5-day. And you might say, well, good, this one's going to outperform it. The answer to that is no. Because we've seen at minimum a 33% increase in movie ticket sales from 2016 when the original came out until today, this movie, this Moana 2, needs to make $109 million, and to be exact, $109.06 million over its 5-day release in order to match the audience numbers of the original Moana. But nobody is talking about that. Nobody's talking about this problem. But there's a bigger problem that lays in wait, let's say. So going back, Culture, going back to this Wicked situation, back on Broadway World, here's the problem people need to understand. Wicked might underperform Moana 2 in terms of the opening week, But Wicked 2 is going after the same demo. It's the Barbie crowd, right? It's the Inside Out 2 crowd. It's the girl boss crowd. And they're not a small demographic. We've seen that with Inside Out 2. But that said, Moana has 1 week of runway before it has huge competition for the exact same demo. That's totally different than Barbie. It's totally different than Inside Out 2, and it could really damage Moana 2 at the box office. What say you?
Oh no, I agree thoroughly. I mean, they are both targeting the same. I know I don't want to say this, but I'm going to girl boss audience that is out there. That's the same Barbie audience. When you look at what Barbie did on its opening weekend, it did exactly twice what they're projecting Moana 2 to do. Of course, it wasn't competing the same time of year. Thanksgiving is a special time in the United States. It doesn't reflect everywhere else, but since we're only looking at the domestic box office, it makes sense. I'm looking at the numbers of these films, and as you pointed out, the numbers they have are tracking behind, not well behind, but behind where the original film fell.
Which is odd culture, because the original film is a first entry into what is now becoming a franchise, but it was a brand new IP. Sequels should not come in low, especially as popular as Moana is. We'll talk about it in a moment, but what in the world's going on here, culture? Why is this coming in low?
Honestly, I think this may have been something that the audience wasn't necessarily looking for. We have, I believe, in the box office, franchise fatigue. People are tired of sequels and threequels and rebootquels and all of that. And I think that the trend is showing that for the most part, unless you may be operating in the horror genre, where they're a little bit more profitable, of course, but also acceptable to an audience. I also am looking at it, and I'm thinking that people are looking more towards, a family entertainment that is available or accessible to the entire family. Now, Moana originally was that way. Will the second film be? I don't know.
Question culture, though, before you go to the next point, you say that sequels are struggling in comparison to new stuff, but for Disney, that has not been the case in animation. Right. Inside Out 2 performed way beyond most people's expectations, and we'll explain why it did so in just a moment. But Inside Out 2 definitely did well. We've seen other cases where that's not been such, as with Lightyear. But yes, Strange World, that didn't do well. Elemental, despite all the PR that it got, really didn't do well. So some of the original stuff from Disney hasn't played out while sequels have. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that we're looking at a trend of them running out of roadway. I don't believe that when we see the next Toy Story iteration that it will be very successful. I think it will largely follow the slow fall off trend that we've seen with sequels. I think you're right, though. I mean, there has been history to point out that things haven't done really well. You can go back to the beginning of the global crisis, where Onward basically, stepped in it. Now, did it step in it because it wasn't going to be a popular film, or because of what was happening in the world around it? So I would say that regardless, Disney is struggling to find a market because they're struggling with their identity more so than anything else. I don't think that'll be Moana will be affected by that. I just think that maybe the audience is having Disney fatigue. I don't know, Pro, but I'll tell you this much.
Maybe after Inside Out 2, I don't know if I'm willing to go there.
No, I understand, and I expect the pushback on that one. But I think the trend has been, outside of Barbie, more downward when it comes to where these movies appeal. You want to have a four quadrant appeal to your tentpole film, especially in animation. You want it to be accessible to everybody. I'm not sure that Moana is going to fall in that category. Now, I know that may be an unpopular opinion, Pro.
Okay, but culture too. Let's say this for people just watching the video. Four quadrant. What you're referring to is any property that aims at all possible demographics. That is colloquially and inside the industry referred to as a four quadrant. Now, there is an exception to that rule, and the exception to that rule is if you're aiming something like Barbie, for example, you don't need to aim it for men. That's counterproductive. Yeah. If you're aiming Star Wars, you don't have to aim it specifically for ladies. That's counterproductive. There are genres that are dominated by a particular group or even singular demographic. And if you throw those away, there's no guarantee that you get any reward from the other demographics ever. So we need to say that too. There are properties that are ravenously consumed by a smaller demographic, and that's okay.
No, absolutely. And if you know your audience, your target audience well, Barbie is the primary example of that. You're going to earn $636 million in the box office. Right. And again, in a lot of ways, I think we're comparing apples to oranges in all ways, except for perhaps the girl boss genre, let's say. But look, no matter what, Moana will likely be very successful in its first weekend. But as you point out, reaching that 100, did you say 109 million that it needs to reach?
109 is what it needs to reach to have the same audience attendance as the first one.
Yeah, and I would argue that even that's a little misleading because the Thanksgiving holiday, your ticket prices aren't going to be, dwindling downward. They're going to be, towards the top end.
Sure,
And
absolutely. We were trying to be as fair as possible, but I totally agree with you. We're being overly kind and conservative to Disney's benefit in what we're putting out here in this video.
Yeah. So look, the domestic earnings of Moana overall was only 248 million for its entire run in the United States. The global box office for the film topped out at 686 million. If you look at those numbers and then you look at something like Barbie, how do those compare?
Right,
Well,
night and day, absolutely.
Yeah. So look, can this do that well that weekend? Certainly, but is that a step forward or maybe a marginal result? I think if it does under 100 million pro, it's not going to be looked at as favorable. I think
here's the danger, Culture.
Sure.
The danger is this is now Disney's biggest princess property, and to say that it's the biggest of the princesses are huge. Now, we've had some pushback on some things, Culture, and I want to address those things because they're legitimate questions about our analysis. And we appreciate those sorts of things, and we address them head on. There's been a question about which is bigger, Moana or Frozen. We're going to address that in just a moment. There's also the question of, well, you guys said that Inside Out 2 was in trouble over and over, and now you're switching to Moana. 2 is in trouble. Why should we believe you now when you were wrong about Inside Out 2? And that's a little bit of a low-resolution reflection of what we were saying about Inside Out 2. What we said about Inside Out 2 the entire way up to it was Disney was putting itself in a position where if the film was woke and if it addressed anxiety in a way that was inappropriate with children, the movie would tank. But if they did that, which we were not expecting them to do, but which they did, which was scrub it of any divisiveness that they could launch that thing like a rocket. Now, I will say that I never predicted that Inside Out 2 would become the highest grossing animated film. And that still boggles my mind. I still don't quite know how that happened, other than we have seen the particular female demographic that has arisen in the last few years that goes and sees Barbie, that goes and sees Inside Out 2. We have seen that group go out in force in a way that really didn't exist prior to the pandemic. And so I am keen to watch that and see, do women now and young women drive box office results for very particular movies? And that could happen for Moana, but I just want to address that's what we looked at with Inside Out 2. Your thoughts?
My skepticism's different this time around, though, Pro. Mine's based on the fact that this was originally a television property.
Yes.
And it was originally driven for some very well, let's put it this way. It was driven for a television audience.
It has characters that are specifically made for the kind of goofy Disney Plus streaming show stuff, and they're going to try to put it into a theater. It's a problem.
And that's really the thing that has been driving my skepticism about this particular film, because it started off as one thing and it's going to be performing or trying to perform as another. And
they plugged it in the wrong week, Culture. They took this thing and they threw it into a week where it's going to face off with Wicked 2 the next week. And what that does is it takes their biggest princess franchise, and we'll read this article in just a moment. But it's undoubtedly it's the biggest. It's bigger than Frozen. I'm sorry. And they've put it in a position where it might get shamed. It might get embarrassed.
Well, will it? The question is, will it fall off greater than 50%? Because consider this, that, and again, apples and oranges, but if you look at the original film, its second weekend, its fall off wasn't enormous. I think it fell off 38%. This thing, with given its competition, will fall off even more than that. Look, opening weekend is one thing. A lot of films can get a big push their opening weekend, but I'm not certain that if you're Disney, you want this movie to be that front loaded. And if it is, and you have a over 50% fall off on weekend two, given the competition, you've got a problem. You are headed into the holidays. There will be a bunch of folks that are not at work or at school, but are they really going to go out and spend, an average of $13 or more on tickets to go see, Moana, when given the financial situation in the United States, you've got many other things to buy that time of year. I don't know, Pro. Like I said, my skepticism is driven for a lot of reasons, primarily because this is not a property that was made as a film originally. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't it pass around between two different groups of people?
It did. And I'll say this too, Culture. There are going to be those who watch this video for about 5 minutes and then they drop a comment and they click off. And some of those comments are going to be, why do you two dudes care about a girl's princess franchise? This is so weird. We'll get some of that. Not much, but we'll get some of it. I just want to say, Culture, that one of the reasons we're looking at this is because Moana has an impact on the stock. The first Moana was an unknown commodity, right? It comes out, nobody really knows what it's going to be. Nobody knows if it'll be good or not. And it holds tremendously well, as you were saying. Then it becomes a streaming darling. There's no other movie like this. So let's read this article. And I want to definitively put to bed that Frozen is anywhere close to it. It's not. This is Disney's most important girl brand, flat out. And so when you take a TV series that it was intended to be, and you throw it into a week where it's going to face massive competition, you're taking a TV show modified to be a movie, calling that a sequel, and then facing it off against major girl-specific competition the very next week. They've really taken quite the risk, and investors might want to take note of that and say, why did you do this? And I know exactly why they did it. We'll show you. This is out of what's on Disney Plus. It says Moana was the most watched movie on streaming services in 2023. By the way, that's why. We'll explain. It says, with 2023 now behind us, Nielsen has collected all of the viewing data for the United States for the year, and Disney Plus dominated the movie category and also had some big hitters in other categories. Folks, that's going to change in 2024 when there's a retrospective. Over half the most watched films of the year were on Disney Plus, with Moana being the most watched movie across all platforms at 11.6 billion minutes viewed. Since Nielsen began measuring streaming, audiences have watched nearly 80 billion minutes of Moana, translating to the full movie being watched 775 million times. Now, you could say, Culture, well, yes, it's getting babysitting ratings, right? Parents are putting kids in front of it and looping it. Okay, but these other films would get the same kind of bounce. Encanto, the second most popular film, is at 9.7 billion minutes. That's almost 2 billion minutes less. While Pixar's latest film, Elemental, was the fourth most watched film, Super Mario's had 8.8, and then they list off the ones that are in the bottom of the top 10, and they don't get a number attached to them. And that includes Frozen. So take note of that. Now, Frozen has a bit higher merchandise sales, and that's largely due to the toy design, I would say. But here's the deal. Culture, I think that Bob Iger, I think that he saw that a 7-year-old film was their number one performer, and he saw that he had a TV show coming out the next year based on that. And just like with the splash pad at Epcot, he said, how do we shove this thing into the theaters somehow? And they did it without the care that and the gravitas that their biggest brand deserves. And they took this thing and they threw it into the movies with a modified TV show, and they picked the wrong week. And now they run the risk of this looking weak. And this is actually such a big brand. Frozen's big too. I'm not saying it's not, but Moana is so big, this actually could shift the stock if they come out and they have a lesser performance than Inside Out 2. And I hope that's not the case. I hope that Moana does really well. I hope that it's just as well written as the first one, because I think the first one is one of the best movies Disney has ever made. So I hope they do a great job.
But Pro, I have to push back on that because, again, the whole reason that I'm skeptical is because it was written for television.
Yes.
It was so it's not going to have the same quality of writing.
The
It's
soundtrack
going
so far does not have the same quality at all.
and it's going to feel disjointed because they're carving up how many episodes was this going to be?
Oh, I don't remember
Do we
now.
know? 8?
You throw me. You throw me now. Well, for animated, it's hard to remember exactly how many they would order.
Sure.
But culture. Here's the thing too. So we're
Mhm.
two dudes talking about a girl's brand, right? So the
Okay.
question might be, why do we care? And the answer is because this is another major Disney brand. Moana at this point might be as big as Star Wars because, well, you saw how Star Wars has performed as of late. So, put a Ray movie out and it might make $200 million. Put out a good Moana movie and you're guaranteed $1 billion at this point if it's good.
And I'll also argue with the windowing as well, because if you wanted this film to really be a thing you could point at as something successful rather than something that's right around the corner, because the earnings call's the 14th.
Right. Yes.
Which is what, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving?
Yep.
So why would you not put this out there on like the 10th? Why would you not put this out there slightly earlier, Pro? If you were going to point at it and say, look at the success of
hubris, because
Maybe
they said
so.
we've got the biggest girl brand on the planet, and we're going to do a Barbie, and we're going to throw it down here, and Wicked get out of the way. And now the projections are coming in, and it's like your attendance is lower than the first, and that shouldn't be possible because this thing has grown in popularity over 7 years.
And I'm going to point at both of these films and saying they both have a lot of hubris behind them. Because the minute,
for a different reason,
and the minute that Wicked, people discover that Wicked is actually not one film but two, because they're advertising it as Wicked the movie.
I just hope they don't cover their eyes, culture, when they find that out. It's a real insult to cover the eyes.
It truly is. You take away somebody's identity when you shade their eyes. There's no doubt about it. But regardless, I'm just saying is I'm sorry, you have to take a look at the given competition. And with Wicked 2, people, I think people hate that type of structure. They really do now. They want a complete, satisfying film. Not something that,
or at least market it in a way that people understand it.
Yeah, and you're going to end up with a lot of people walking out of the first Wicked film very frustrated, but that's a completely different problem. I'm just saying I don't think either of these films are going to live up to what their studio expectations were, and I could be wrong, and occasionally I am, especially with a film like Barbie, when I didn't understand exactly who this demographic was. Now that I have a better understanding, I'm going to say they're definitely targeting that in Moana 2, but I don't know if people are going to be feeling it. I think word of mouth on this film could be either potentially, helpful or very detrimental. And I'm leaning towards very detrimental. And again, Thanksgiving's a long weekend, bro. Thanksgiving is, for the studio starts on a Wednesday. So, if word of mouth comes out on Wednesday that, the film is not anywhere near up to snuff, and that continues leading into the Saturday, Sunday of the weekend, which is the biggest shopping. By the way, that's something that's a thing here in the States, folks. You have Thanksgiving, then you have a couple 3 days of shopping, and oftentimes you'll mix in a film, especially if you're out with your family. If the word of mouth on this comes out and it's not, something that's worth seeing, and you don't have a little girl that's clamoring to see Moana 2, which I don't know how they would. The marketing so far has been a little soft, but we'll see what happens as we get into November.
I agree, it's been soft.
Usually that's indicative of the strength that the studio actually thinks the film has, but we'll see. So I don't know. All things given, we're a little over or a little under a month out, Pro. So I'm going to say that somewhere in there, about a month from now, we'll either be on the right track or we'll be incredibly wrong. I'm willing to bet that we'll be on the right track.
If we are incredibly wrong, though, we'll also be incredibly happy because if Moana 2 is a great movie, that somehow they pull it off where it's as good as the first and it delights audiences, well, how could we not be happy with that? What we're suggesting right here is we're starting to see some signs that things are slipping. We're not here to definitively say that Moana 2 is going to fail. I mean, who knows? It could get up there with Inside Out 2 numbers. You can't know until we know the quality of the film. Yeah. But there are signs that Disney made some major mistakes in the timing of the release, as well as capitalizing on the success of a movie whose prequel is the #1 streaming movie in the world 7 years after its release. That puts it in a class that there's no other film like it. Hopefully Disney took a good job and did a good job of bringing this out at the same quality level for the success, because there's no reason to stop. They could have Moana 3, 4, 5, TV show, toys, do it all.
But again, because this has changed hands, and there's no argument that it hasn't, and it doesn't have. Is it going to be different tonally? Again, tone change can be incredibly detrimental.
Yes.
Like you said, a lot of my speculations, in terms of, is this of the same quality? Is this of the same tone? Is this of the same direction as the previous film? I don't know. And as you pointed out, I don't think this is going to be the same. And either that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Again, just leaning to bad.
But folks, we will find out and we will follow it, and we're happy to fully explain our analysis when we do these things. People will say, well, it's going to make more. How can you guys be negative? And it's like, well, because we actually know the numbers when it comes to the average movie ticket price. We know the attendance, and that means cultural clout, and cultural clout means merchandise sales, and merchandise sales is where it's at. So we try to go through all that, folks. We hope we did a good job. Hope you enjoyed it. A longer video than usual when we're talking about this sort of a topic. But folks, we enjoy bringing this to you, making you smarter every single day. No tuition required, because you're all on scholarship. Folks, click the like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. And go check out Culture Casino over at Culture Casino, the YouTube channel. Tell the folks out there what you've got coming up.
Sure. Actually, on this day, we'll probably have a video dropping about Dustborn, and the fact that it really was kind of culturally driven by one myopic viewpoint. That's probably the primary video today. And then later this evening, after Valiant Renegades live show, if you're watching this video on release day, you can check out Sunday Night Culture, the late night show that I do, kind of a variety show in a way, that really is designed to entertain more than anything else. So hopefully get a chance to join us. Last weekend was Robots, and this Sunday, well, we got another special surprise for you.
Fantastic stuff. Culture, always one of our favorites. The audience loves you, and we love having you on. Thank you, sir. And folks, go over there and subscribe to Culture Casino, as well as That Game Place, the gaming channel that Culture runs. He's covering Parcheesi 24/7. No, not that kind of game. Backgammon. No. All right, folks, we've got to go. It's been a wonderful time spending time with you. It's an honor, as always, to be invited into your day. Appreciated. That's you. Folks, until the next time, keep learning, keep growing, and as ever, keep having fun.
I'm the ghost of Star Wars.
You know what would be a real treat this Halloween? Checking out WDW Pro. He's got all the sweet news on his Thursday live show at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Not to mention, his daily videos are a real treat.
Guys, I'm the ghost of Star Wars. Get it?
You know, we should go and make sure we're subscribed.
Guys, I'm the ghost of Star Wars.
And while we're at it, we'll ring that bell to make sure we're notified.
Great, let's go. Because, we actually care about that. Let's go.
Fact. Star Wars is not dead. It's haunting the staffs of Disney Plus.